Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that can cause a whole lot of stress for nonprofit leaders. What to do when you have to reinstate a lapsed charitable registration. This explainer is part of our multi-state fundraising compliance series, and it's a resource brought to you by Ironwood Registrations. Our whole goal here is to break down these complex topics into practical, understandable terms. You know that sinking feeling, right? You find out a renewal was missed or a notice from a state wasn't resolved, and suddenly your mind starts racing. You're worried fundraising has to stop or that some serious penalties are on the way. Well, don't worry. We're going to break down what it all means and how you can get everything back in order efficiently. So let's start by just getting on the same page. First off, what exactly are we talking about when we say a registration has lapsed? To put it simply, it just means your official permission to ask for donations in a certain state is no longer active. You've basically fallen out of good standing with that state's charity regulator. So how does this even happen? Well, it's usually because of some pretty common administrative oversights. Maybe the annual renewal paperwork wasn't filed on time, or maybe the required financials, like an audit, weren't submitted with it. It could also be that the state sent a deficiency notice that got lost in the shuffle, or simply that the renewal fees just didn't get paid. Now, here's a key thing to remember. Not every state actually uses the word lapsed. You're going to see a few different terms out there depending on where you are. For example, a state might call your status delinquent, expired, inactive, or even the scarier sounding revoked. But here's the thing, no matter what they call it, the practical effect is exactly the same. Your organization is no longer compliant to solicit donations in that state. Okay, now that we know what a lapse is, let's dig into why it happens, and maybe more importantly, what are the potential consequences? We tend to see 5 common operational breakdowns. First, just plain old missed renewal deadlines, which is easy to do when you're tracking different dates across a bunch of states. Second, you might grow and cross a revenue threshold that now requires an audit, but you only submitted a less formal financial review. Third, maybe your Form 990 or audit is on extension, but the proper state extensions weren't filed alongside it. Fourth, simple correspondence breakdowns. A letter gets lost or sent to the wrong person. And finally, expanding into a new state and starting to fundraise before that initial registration is actually complete. So what's really at stake? The consequences usually fall into 2 big buckets: direct financial costs and a risk to your public reputation. States can impose late fees and even civil penalties, but they can also put you on a public list of delinquent charities, which can definitely damage donor trust. They might also require a lot of extra paperwork to get back in good standing and could even require you to pause fundraising until the whole thing is resolved. Okay, so you found a lapse. First things first, don't panic. The very first step is to just take a breath and do a really clear-eyed assessment of the situation. Here's your immediate checklist. First, figure out exactly which state or states are affected. Next, how long has the registration been inactive? Are we talking a few weeks or a few years? This next one is critical. Were you actively soliciting donations there during this lapsed period? And finally, what specific paperwork is missing? Getting a handle on this timeline and scope is absolutely essential before you take any action. All right, let's talk about the path back. What does the actual reinstatement process look like? Well, it's really important to know that it can be very different from one state to the next. You'll generally face one of 2 paths. Some states just require a simple late renewal. It's pretty straightforward. You submit the required forms, updated financials, and pay any late fees. But other states have a much more formal reinstatement process. This can be way more involved, sometimes requiring a special application, letters explaining the lapse, or maybe even a board resolution authorizing the whole thing. So to get reinstated, states will often require all the missing documentation. This can mean filing renewals for multiple prior years, submitting past Form 990s and audits, and providing updated lists of your officers and directors. And they might also ask you to disclose any fundraising activities that happened during the lapse. If there's one really important takeaway here, it's this. Acting quickly and cooperatively makes all the difference. The sooner you identify the problem and start the corrective filing process, the more straightforward it's going to be. Prompt action is your best friend here. It truly limits the potential for the situation to escalate. So once you've resolved the immediate issue, the work isn't quite done. This is actually a perfect opportunity to turn a problem into a long-term operational improvement. Let's look at how to build systems to prevent this from happening ever again. It's really essential to reframe how you think about this. Lapses are almost never intentional. They're symptoms of operational breakdowns, especially as a nonprofit grows, adds more states, and its reporting gets more complex. Think of it as a sign that your systems need to scale right along with your mission. So, what does a good prevention system look like? Well, it starts with having a centralized way to track all your state deadlines. It includes tight coordination between your finance team preparing the audit and Form 990 and the team that's handling the state filings. You absolutely need a system for monitoring all correspondence from state agencies, clear internal ownership so someone is responsible for compliance, and finally, regular reviews of all your multi-state obligations. And that's the bottom line. Reinstating a lapsed registration is manageable, for sure, but preventing one is always better. Strong compliance oversight isn't just about avoiding penalties. It's about building a stable foundation that protects your fundraising and supports your organization's sustainable growth. Ultimately, addressing lapses as early as possible protects your ability to fundraise without interruption. By investing in strong compliance systems, you're not just preventing future problems, you're actually building a more resilient organization. Thanks so much for watching.